Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of the Sports Beat with Richard Holdridge, presented by Georgia Alabama Sports Live. I hope everybody's having a great day. We had such an incredible weekend. We had Super Wild Card, NFL playoffs. I'll get into that all week, but I do have a special guest I want to bring on because I did go have an emergency podcast last week. I mean, the news broke. Thrift Barons and I were doing our Georgia Alabama Sports Live show. The news broke that Nick Saban retired. I mean, we did not see this coming out of nowhere. And then on Saturday, we learned that Kalen DeBoer was going to be the new head coach at Alabama. He had a press conference on Saturday, and so I couldn't think of a better guest than to bring on an Alabama fan, a near and dear friend of mine that I know from our college days at Freed-Hardeman University. He was kindly enough to replace me on the Up All Night show. Him and Brad Page did that show, but he did an outstanding job, and his broadcasting career has really flourished over the years. You know, he's a host of a podcast called Ben and Travis, Helping, Healing, Humor. It's a religious podcast. It's just a great message, good guest. He's also a host of the podcast called Clean Old Fashioned Dislike. I love that podcast because it really brings a perspective on sports. Please welcome to the show, Travis Creasy.
Hey, Richard, man, I appreciate the invite. It's been a wild week. You described it perfectly in the land of the Crimson Tide, for sure.
Before we start about Alabama, how about those Harding Bison? National champions.
That was awesome to watch.
And we're very familiar with Harding because they're the same faith base as the school that we went to. I almost went to Harding. I had family members that went there. I was trying to get Coach Simmons on the show. I just thought that was incredible. There was a great article written about Harding, and really Coach Simmons was just displaying that message to his team. It's not about wins and losses. It's about glorifying God. I thought it was just a great message by Coach Simmons. And what a story for the Harding Bison to rush for over 500 yards in that championship game. I watched that championship game from start to finish on ESPNU. And Harding is your NCAA Division II champions. I know they had a parade in Searcy. And I'm just happy for the community of Searcy and Harding University.
Yeah, it was a great game, throwback game. I enjoyed it. The Colorado School of Mines comes out, drives it down, scores a touchdown, and you're like, oh, well, maybe they're in trouble. And then Harding scores, I think, the next 6 drives, 3.5 yards at a pop, and so it was really impressive. And like you said, when the head coach gets on national television and quotes maybe a whole chapter of Ephesians, I think it was,
yes,
pretty impressive. I did think it was kind of interesting. The Division II title used to be in North at UNA in Florence, my hometown, Florence, Alabama, and they're like 90 Churches of Christ. And had it been still hosted there, Harding would have had a decided advantage, I think, in the support and the crowd. And so I just kind of giggled to myself about if it was still there, kind of how that would have looked for them. But man, it was an impressive win. Dominant is the word I would use.
No question about that. My niece and nephew both went to Harding. My wife's cousin played football at Harding. I know they are excited. And I was trying to get some Harding championship gear. I think so. We've had Pepperdine won the College World Series in 1992. The Freed-Hardeman girls won the NAIA championship in 2018. Faulkner has won a couple of NAIA baseball championships and a basketball championship in 2001. Abilene Christian just dominates track and field, and so Lipscomb's next. You got to get a championship somewhere. They do have a basketball championship in 1986. I did forget about that. Legendary coach Don Meyer.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, that girls team from Freed, I don't know that I've ever seen somebody shoot the three-pointer. I mean, outside, of course, Golden State and one particular player. But I watched that game, and, like, the nets barely moved. They were such smooth shooters from long range.
All right, Travis, let's talk about the news that broke last week. And I knew that eventually Nick Saban would have to retire. I mean, nobody lasts in this business forever. He's, 72 years old, still coaching at a high level. I thought that this was his best season as far as coaching up the Alabama Crimson Tide. They fell short in the college football playoff, but the sports world was completely shocked when we found out that Nick Saban was retiring from the University of Alabama after 17 seasons, 6 national championships, a record of 206-29, an astonishing record. Travis, we all remember the losses more than the wins because they didn't happen that often. He had 4 Heisman Trophy winners, and think about all the players that got drafted into the NFL that made huge impacts. He's going to be missed. But what's your thoughts when you first heard the news that Nick Saban was retiring from Alabama?
I should have went to the Rose Bowl. That was my immediate response. To me, the Rose Bowl, Michigan, Alabama, the Rose Bowl, it doesn't really get a whole lot bigger than that. But I had debated back and forth about going. The Rose Bowl is a bucket list of mine. And so when I saw it, it's disbelief. Well, let me make sure. You want to check your sources. And then when it comes across ESPN, that's pretty solid information. We should have seen it coming to some degree, I think, as Alabama fans, purchasing the multi-million-dollar home in Florida. There was a clip from before the SEC championship game where Nick basically intimated, "I'm too old for this." And there's things, but you never believe it. You never think it's going to end. Of course, like you're saying, we all know at some point this comes to an end. But he's a perfectionist, and I get it. That he's kind of like, before my powers diminish, I'd rather walk off. And we all know people that should have done that. That looking back, hindsight, you're like, Bobby Bowden probably should have hung it up a little early, And he's not the only one, of course. And of course, as an Alabama fan, I'm kind of like, and years ago, probably 5 years ago, I went, when he decides to leave, he gets to leave, and he should leave on his own terms, whether that's
right
after a 7-6 team or what it was. And so, part of me gets it. At the height of his powers, you much rather him have went out as a national champion if you're an Alabama fan. But you get it. I totally agree. He got the most out of this team, and I think it took the most out of him as well.
Nick Saban was the head coach at Alabama starting in 2007, and when he got hired at Alabama, I don't think he was Alabama's first choice. They were going after Rich Rodriguez. I remember making that transition from Mike Shula back in 2006, and Nick Saban was a good college coach. He did lead LSU to a national championship, but we didn't see dominance at LSU as we did in Alabama. He just took off in 2007. He went 7-6. I mean, we'll give him that. It was just trying to get his players in there. 2008, when they beat Georgia, I remember College Game Day was there. It was a blackout game for Georgia. Georgia was a preseason number 1. Alabama went into Athens and punched Georgia in the mouth. And in my opinion, Travis, as a Georgia fan, I felt like that completely flipped the momentum from both programs. I thought that Georgia was going in the wrong direction, and Alabama catapulted into what we saw as dominance for approximately 16 years of dominance, because they only lost 3 games one time. Every other time, they have won at least 11 games in every season that Nick Saban coached.
Yeah, there are some ways you can look at it, and as this is an Alabama fan speaking, you could make, and I know there are people who've made this comment, that with the talent he had, he really didn't accomplish as much as he could have. And of course, that ball's shaped weird. So it bounces weird, and you're going to have things that go wrong. But I mean, the level of dominance for the long period of time is ridiculous. But there is a relationship there between Alabama and Georgia. I've always had respect for Georgia's program. Anybody who doesn't like Auburn and Tennessee is okay with me. And you're seeing it now in the turnover. Now that Nick Saban's gone, there's kind of been some back and forth. And it's interesting to see Kirby's doing what he should be doing. He should be taking advantage of this portal opening for 30 days and the back and forth. Of course, Texas has gotten some of our players. Florida State has gotten some of our players. And so my big thing is, hey, we got to survive this 30 days. But going back to your point, yeah, I think the Clemson game to start that season and the Georgia game were big-time moments. And then taking a Florida team to the fourth quarter in that first SEC championship game, as heartbreaking as it was, were huge moments in saying, hey, Alabama's back, and it's because of this guy, Nick Saban.
Alabama wins the national championship in 2009, goes undefeated, beats Texas in the national championship, and you have a guy like Mark Ingram winning the Heisman Trophy, Alabama's first Heisman Trophy winner. But that was Alabama was just getting started. Yeah, they made a documentary. I love this documentary. I know, Travis, you probably like this documentary too. Roll Tide, War Eagle, because Auburn wins a national championship in 2010, and one of the Auburn players said, all the hate back and forth between Alabama and Auburn, we just need to sit back and just recognize what this state has accomplished in the last 2 years. And of course, Alabama goes on to win the national championship 2 more times in 2011, 2012 with really, in my opinion, the most NFL-ready quarterback, A.J. McCarron. He actually was playing in the NFL, and this was when Alabama's identity really wasn't quarterback-centric. They were a physical defense with great running backs like Mark Ingram, Trent Richardson, Eddie Lacy, T.J. Yeldon. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And Alabama breaks the hearts of Georgia fans in that 2012 SEC championship, and then they just punched Notre Dame in the mouth. I don't think Notre Dame had a chance in the 2013 national championship. And then, Travis, I hate to bring back painful memories because the kick six happened in 2013, and in my opinion, if the kick six doesn't happen, Alabama wins that game and they three-peat.
Yeah.
And they beat Florida State in the national championship. Jameis Winston. I honestly feel that way. But was there any time when Alabama went a couple of years without a national championship? They went 2 years. They went to the college football playoff, lost to Ohio State. Did Alabama fans start to panic a little bit that Nick Saban went 2 years without a national championship?
How ridiculous!
That's how ridiculous that sounds.
Exactly, that's crazy. I think, and that's the thing the new coach comes into. And as Alabama fans, we need to calm down a little bit. If I can just say that, but yeah, if you think about, I was riding home with an Auburn fan last night. If the 4-team playoff is around in 2013, 1 year earlier, you could have had a rematch of that Iron Bowl.
Yes.
For the national championship.
Absolutely.
After the kick six. And the state of Alabama might have ceased to exist. So it's probably good that didn't happen. But yeah, when you think about, he's never had a 4-year player not win a national championship. Anybody who was around for 4 years won a national championship.
That's incredible, Travis. All right, 2015, they win the national championship. Derrick Henry wins the Heisman, a very close back-and-forth game against Deshaun Watson and Clemson. Probably the greatest coaching staff ever assembled. You had Lane Kiffin, your offensive coordinator. Kirby Smart was your defensive coordinator. You had Mario Cristobal. You had Dan Lanning. You had Billy Napier. They just had incredible coaches on that staff. Alabama wins another national championship, and then you got a back and forth between Alabama and Clemson. There was a 4-year period where it was Alabama or Clemson, and it was great for college football. I enjoyed it. There was 1 year where LSU caught lightning in a bottle with Joe Brady and Joe Burrow, 2019. I thought Alabama could have won if they would have beat LSU in Tuscaloosa. But when you look at the 2020 season, offensively, probably the best team under Mac Jones, Najee Harris. They had some good players. It was the COVID year, but they go undefeated again. And that was the last national championship that Alabama has won in 2020. But when you look at the legacy of Nick Saban, think about the amount of national championships they could have won. They could have beat Georgia in 2021 if John Minchie and Jameson Williams doesn't get hurt. They could have beat Clemson that time that Deshaun Watson got that game-winning touchdown. Jalen Hurts' first year in Alabama. He gets the go-ahead touchdown of that game, and Deshaun Watson marches all the way down and gets that game-winning touchdown to Hunter Renfrow. There's been so many times where Alabama could have had more than 6 national championships.
And the world rejoices that that's not true. That didn't happen.
Oh, yeah, being an Alabama fan, I know you would have loved that.
Yeah. But, yeah, that level, he made it clockwork. And I think to some degree that spoiled us Alabama fans, and that's going to change. I'm a fan of the DeBoer hire.
I am too.
I think he's one of the best, outside of – you're not going to get Kirby. You make that call, and you make him tell you no. You're not getting Kirby. outside of him, I mean, to me, there's 3 or 4 candidates, and he's right there at the top of the list. He just got done going to the national championship, but he made it so clockwork, and it was such a you knew what you were going to get. Even if you beat us, it's going to take, and Michigan found this out, 4 quarters and some change. Clemson is that one game where they just beat us really badly, and a lot of that's Alabama mistakes, but kudos to Clemson for taking advantage of it. I'm not taking away from their win. Same thing with Michigan. Michigan gave us opportunity after opportunity to win that game and put it away, and we just didn't take advantage of it. They made the plays, and we didn't. And I think the Michigan team actually reminds me of those early Saban teams, where they didn't lean on the quarterback. It was the running game. It was the defense. But to your point, yeah, I mean, it was just clockwork. It was like, this is going to happen here. This is going to happen here, 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 and here. And so now that he's kind of out of the picture, it's weird, right? It's like, what's going to happen? And we can't whine. We can't complain because this is what a lot of other fan bases go through every year. And so it's a little different for us today. But it's okay.
Let's talk about the new head coach of Alabama, Kalen DeBoer. He coached at Washington for 2 seasons and led Washington to the national championship game where they lost to Michigan. Had Michael Penix Jr., just a fantastic quarterback. He wins everywhere he goes. He dominated at Sioux Falls at the NAIA level. He coached 2 seasons at Fresno State. I think Alabama got the right hire. But the question is the longer he stays at Alabama, we're talking 4 or 5 seasons, when he gets his own recruiting class, he is going to be judged on his record against Auburn, on his record against Georgia, on his record against Ole Miss if Lane Kiffin decides to stay at Ole Miss. There are some good coaches in the SEC. I think he's going to have his work cut out, but I don't necessarily think that we'll ever see the dominance of Alabama because of NIL and the transfer portal. But I think Kalen DeBoer is going to have instant success, especially with Jalen Milroe coming back next year. I was looking at the 2024 schedule. I believe they're actually going to be 3-0 going into that Georgia game on September 28th. And that will be the first test for Coach DeBoer. I know that I see them beating Western Kentucky, South Florida, and at Wisconsin. I know the rare going to a Power 5 conference game on the road. They did that with Texas a couple of years ago. They're doing that with Wisconsin now. But how optimistic are these Alabama fans about the Kalen DeBoer era?
I think, once again, most people who know what they're talking about realize that this is a good hire. He's been a winner at every level. The SEC is a completely different animal. And so you have to temper your expectation. I think 10-2 is the new undefeated with this SEC that we're at now. And that's going to take some getting used to, not just by Alabama fans, but mainly Alabama. Like the 12-0 seasons are, I think, a thing of the past. Georgia could do it, right? With the stability they've got, they could do it. But, man, these schedules are crazy difficult. Alabama goes to Oklahoma the week before the Iron Bowl. I mean,
wow.
It's going to be wild. And, of course, the Florida fans, if there's any listening, they're like, I don't want to hear about having a hard schedule because theirs is terrible. But, yeah, I think everybody needs to temper their expectations. I think 10-2 is an outstanding season and should get you in the playoff. But, yeah, I think everything's up in the air. In some ways, there's not a good time for him to retire with the new college football calendar. Recruiting is 24/7. You got to recruit your own guys to stay. You got to go out and get these other guys. And so I don't know that there's a better time for him to have retired, considering the timetable. Before all this NIL stuff, there was actually a downtime where probably a good time to transition out. But, I'm excited. I'm hopeful, but I also have tempered expectations of communication, play calls, how much similarity is there going to be? There's going to be a learning curve. I'm glad he's got like 3 weeks to kind of get that down. That trip to Wisconsin's not going to be a cakewalk. And, of course, welcome to the SEC. You get Georgia at home. I guess at least it's not in Athens. But, I think he'll have success. Will Alabama be patient enough to let him have an opportunity, like you're saying, get his own guys. Let's see what he can do, and hope for the best.
You're right, and 10-2 just might be good enough to get into the college football playoff with the teams going to 12, and they're doing away with the division. So we could see an Iron Bowl rematch in the SEC championship. We could see Alabama LSU. It's going to be a lot of fun. I still think when we have SEC media days in the summer and they come out with the preseason rankings, in fairness, I think Georgia's going to be 1, but I think Alabama, they're not going to drop off that far. I think they'll be number 2. They had the odds on to win the national championship. They're giving a lot of respect for Georgia because they feel that Georgia should have been one of the teams that were still remaining in the college football playoff because that SEC championship could have gone either way. I thought that Georgia had a lot of receivers banged up, and their play calling was kind of questionable, but Alabama deserved to win that game, don't get me wrong. And Alabama played Michigan very tough in the college football playoff. And like I've said before, Travis, that was probably Nick Saban's best coaching job. If you look at what the Alabama team was after they barely beat South Florida to making it to the college football playoff, playing Michigan in the Rose Bowl that went on to win the national championship, I got to say that was the best job that Nick Saban has done in his coaching career at Alabama.
I think you make a great argument. I can't argue. I can't disagree with you on that. One question about the DeBoer hire is the defense. Like I'm kind of shocked, and we may have a bunch of defensive players leave, but like he's an offensive guy. The defense is my question, right? I'm not really worried about us scoring points. It's can we stop the other team? And I've been kind of shocked that it's more offensive guys leaving than defensive, but we'll see. We still got 23 weeks left, 3 weeks left for kids to transfer out after the retirement of Nick Saban, but we'll see.
Travis, do they get a big-time defensive coordinator, like a well-known name, to be the defensive coordinator at Alabama, like a Dan Quinn from the Dallas Cowboys?
That has not happened yet. I know that Tavares Robinson had taken the job with Georgia, and there's been recent smoke news that he might actually come back and be full-time defense coordinator. That's why I'm saying Georgia's kind of back and forth. I don't know who they'll go get if they don't get him. I've heard the Iowa defensive coordinator.
That'd be a good one.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I said, the SEC is a different animal. Stopping Big Ten offenses week in, week out, I think is a little different than stopping the SEC offenses. That's a concern. Is he going to be able to recruit the South? And even if he can, is he going to be able to recruit at the level of even a Lane Kiffin? So.
All right, let's switch gears and let's talk about your podcast that you do called Clean Old Fashioned Dislike. I love this podcast because you actually break down rivalries and you have a little fun with it. We had the Green Bay Packers defeat the Dallas Cowboys. I consider that a big rivalry in the NFL. Yes. They're going to be playing the 49ers in the divisional round. That is another big-time rivalry, in my opinion. They've met many times in the postseason in the NFL. And when I think of the Dallas Cowboys, we got a lot of fans out there that they had so much expectations that the Cowboys were going to make it to the Super Bowl this year. How disappointing was it that the Dallas Cowboys could not get the job done against the Green Bay Packers and losing that game 48-32, and they're going home. I mean, Mike McCarthy is on the hot seat, and they might clean house, and the Packers move on, and they're playing the 49ers in the divisional round.
Yeah, the Good Old Fashioned Dislike podcast is a lot of fun. We have the panel of dislike. We may ought to add you to the panel of dislike, but we just kind of throw out things that we like about a team, what they don't like, and sometimes it has nothing to do with football. It may be their town, their state, or whatever.
Their colors, jerseys.
Yeah, so we determine who we're cheering for. Right now we're in our pick'em phase where we kind of pick the wild card wins, and at the end of actually March Madness, the panel member who has the best wins, we receive a custom jersey that he can flaunt it in the rest of our faces. But, it's got to be disappointing for the Cowboys to win and to win so well at home and then to lose at home. And then, of course, you got the Mike McCarthy Green Bay connection. And so that had to add a little bit more to it. And I was just out in Dallas, Texas yesterday. And, man, there were Cowboys fans everywhere. They were decked out in their blue. ready to roll, and I think the confidence was high that they were going to win. And so, man, it had to be extra cold. It was cold out there when we left, but to leave the stadium that night with a loss, I'm sure it felt more like Green Bay.
Well, Travis, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule and just coming on the show and talking a little Alabama football. And before I let you go, tell all my listeners where they can find you and Ben on social media, and what are some of the podcasts, how they could subscribe to your podcast, and where you could find them.
Yeah, the easiest place to go is benandtravis.com, benandtravis.com, and you can click the drop-down menu. The more content is where all of our podcasts are ranked, listed, and so you can click there. That's the easiest way. We got the Helping Healing Humor, which you mentioned, our mental health from a Christian perspective. Ben's a professional counselor. He has the Friday Refresh, which is a 3 to 5 minute motivational podcast every other Friday. And then throughout football season, I'm doing the good old-fashioned Dislike, taking a rivalry each week, talking about the history, and then deciding who we're rooting for. So I appreciate that, Richard. Man, you do a great job. Love all your content you're putting out there, covering all the sports. And, man, there is no downtime. Talking about the sports calendar, there just is no downtime, right?
No, not at all. Thanks again, Travis Creasy, and would love to definitely get you and Ben on the show again. And still haven't heard back from Brad Page. I wonder if he's doing well, because I haven't had him on in a while. But yeah, I appreciate all the work that you guys do. Oh, I know. He's probably snowed in Tennessee. I hope he's safe. I know. I hope everybody out in Tennessee is safe. I know that they're getting a lot of snow right now. But yeah, it's been fun, and it's really just great just to reflect back at our times at Freed Harmon. And I've always enjoyed our friendships over the years. And thank you once again for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, that's it. That is our show. Thank you, everybody, for watching on Facebook Live and on YouTube. Don't forget you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day, and we are out of here.